There's a whole sermon in that song, a whole sermon in that song. And it fits so perfectly with the book that we have been exploring this month, the book called The 5 Invitations, written by Frank Ostaseski. He is the co-founder of the Zen Hospice Project in San Francisco, California. And the 5 Invitations is a result of deep insights that he gleaned as he would sit by the bedside of those making their transitions. And he's learned so much in that process. We began with his first invitation, which was, don't wait, don't wait. And his second invitation that we explored last week being, welcome everything, push nothing away. And today, the third invitation is, bring your whole self to the experience. Bring your whole self to the experience. Say that with me. Bring your whole self to the experience. Let's own it. Bring my whole self to the experience. Together. Bring my whole self to the experience. The song that Nicole just shared with us, written by Karen Taylor Good, Being Real, the song written about Pinocchio, right? Wooden heart, wooden little character. No pain, no hurt, no love, no joy. I want to be real. I want to be real. Is another way of saying, let's be about bringing our whole self to the experience. The word invitation that Frank uses in the title, 5 Invitations. When you think of an invitation, it's a request to participate in something. And usually invitations are positive, right? We get an invitation to a party, a wedding, a shower, a celebration. There's a sense of joy and anticipation that we're being included in something. And these invitations are an invitation to step more fully into our life experience, to not wait, to welcome that which is here, to not push anything away, and in the whole living out of our lives, to bring our whole self forward. I think we all started off that way. As children are naturally natural. Children are comfortable in their own skin. Children are comfortable being who they are, how they are. And one of the best things we can do as parents, as grandparents, aunts and uncles and teachers is to encourage them to bring their whole self, to be who they really are, to be who they really are. Have you ever watched a toddler, maybe in a grocery store or a department store or in the mall, just suddenly dancing around? Maybe music comes on and they're dancing like no one's watching, like the song. Or they might break out singing or telling a story or something like no one is judging. I want to stop here for a moment and ask you just to reflect upon yourself. Where is that child in you today? Are there parts of you that you've closed down to? Are there parts of you that you have disassociated from? Are there parts of you that you don't want to look at and you sure don't want anybody else to see? What is it that causes us to stop being our full, authentic selves? What do you think stops us? Why? What happened to that child somewhere along the way? Talk to me a little bit. What happened to him? Shame, I think I heard. How about embarrassment? Judgment is a big one. Shame, embarrassment, judgment, humiliation, rejection, comparison. You need to fit in this box. If you grew up and are of similar age and gender as I am, you probably grew up in a box that was trying to be broken open, a box that women and girls should be a certain way and have a certain place in the world. If you were born gay, if you were born lesbian, depending upon your age, you were probably felt that you were in a box, that you couldn't be what? Your full, natural, authentic self, right? And yet, who you are that. No matter who puts the limits around you or the boxes around you, or the layers of shame and judgment and embarrassment and humiliation, those are layers of hurt and woundedness that cover up that beautiful natural child that we all started out as, that we need to celebrate. So what causes us to hold back? What causes us to hold back, to pull away from who we really are, and then wonder why our relationships don't quite work well? How can somebody ever really love us if they don't know who we are because we don't show them? Right? Right? How can they ever be there for us if we have put on this mask that everything is perfect and fine? If as a young boy we put on a mask that we cannot cry, we cannot show that we have feelings, we have to look a certain way, and then we carry that into adult manhood. How can anybody really know us if we aren't real? If we aren't real. If we aren't real. In this invitation in the book, Frank presents a really beautiful illustration for this. He says, imagine a life-size, three-dimensional, 1,000 or more puzzle of you. Three-dimensional puzzle of you in a box, and you're putting it together. And as you put it together, you recognize easily certain pieces. Oh, my hair, my eyes, my nose, my hands, my legs, so forth. And then you take out a piece and you go, oh, I don't like that one. I'm going to put that one back. And then you take out another piece and go, oh, well, I heard this about my nose or how I look or this part of my personality or my orientation. So I'm going to hide that piece. I'm going to set it aside. What happens then when we look at that puzzle? Is it complete? No. And is it frustrating to look at that puzzle and not see it whole? As soon as I say that, I think of being a little girl. And my grandmother on my father's side loved to play jigsaw puzzles. But it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I learned something that wasn't so nice about Grandma Clara. She loved jigsaw puzzles so much that she had to be the person to put the last piece in. And so guess what Grandma Clara always did? She hid a piece. She hid a piece. And that puzzle was not complete without that one piece. It didn't matter if 999 pieces were there. If that one piece was missing, the puzzle was what? Incomplete. As we kind of play with that illustration of Frank's, of us and being this three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, how complete is your puzzle? And are there pieces that you have put aside? And in putting them aside, there's probably, I'm sure, there's a reason you put them aside. Somebody somehow told you to reject that part of yourself. It could have been a quality that you had, an emotional quality or a mental quality. Could have even been a skill that you now are glad you have, but you were told, no, put that aside. That's going to get you in trouble, or people aren't going to like you, or you're not going to get a job, or you're not going to get married, or whatever the thing might have been that we were told. And so we put it aside. But then we no longer really recognize ourselves. And when we don't recognize ourselves, and when we aren't our real self, it becomes a big problem, not only for us, but for the people who want to get close to us. We all want to look good, right? We all want to present the best version of ourselves as we can. And that's completely understandable. And yet I think we are living in a day and age where some of that is becoming very dangerous. And by that I mean, think about the constant bombardment of social media images of what we should look like, how we should dress, how we should perform, all of that. Think of the pressure that must be for our young people. No wonder so many of them are struggling, trying to figure out who they are and how they should be. And what a powerful role we can play in their lives to help encourage them, to see them through the eyes of spirit and encourage them to bring, as Frank would say, their whole selves to the experience. This is an important statement he makes. Wholeness does not mean perfection. Say that with me. Wholeness does not mean perfection. Wholeness does not mean perfection. Wholeness simply means no part left out. Wholeness simply means no part left out. Say that with me. Wholeness simply means no part left out. You get to be real. Real. He gives what I found to be a very moving personal sharing of being real in this chapter. And there's a phrase he used that really jumped out at me. And it was a phrase, don't be a role, be a soul. Don't be a role, R-O-L-E, be a soul, S-O-U-L. And he gave the illustration of doing his work as a hospice person, a hospice not participant, but a hospice presence. And he was doing this with a friend of his who was dying of AIDS. And so he provided the care for his friend. And his friend was getting toward advanced stages and was losing cognition, but was also losing bodily functions. And Frank writes about a time of being in the bathroom with his friend and cleaning up after the mess that his friend had left, and doing everything he could to clean up and make it all right. And his friend looked at him and softly whispered, "You're trying too hard. You're trying too hard." And Frank writes about that and says, in a flash, in a moment, I realized I was hiding behind a mask. I was hiding behind the mask of Mr. Hospice, to be cool and calm and present and able to perform the functions that needed to be performed. I was hiding behind that and not allowing my soul, the wholeness of me, to be there for my friend. The role required one thing of me, but the thing I was holding back was the rawness and the realness of what I was feeling in that moment. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? We all play roles in life, don't we? Think of all the roles you play right now. Roles are not bad. I'm a mom. I'm a sister. I'm a wife. I'm a minister. I'm a neighbor. Lots of different roles that I play. Lots of different roles that you play as well. Roles give us structure in our lives. And roles come with certain responsibilities and certain ways of being. I was just recently talking to one of our new board members. You're going to be introduced to her in the newsletter this week, Susan Madison. And in part of the orientation and interview conversation that I had with Susan, was I said, I play the role of minister here at the church, minister and hopefully spiritual support and inspiration to you. And I also play the role of CEO. And those are two, most ministers in Unity do. And those are two very distinct roles with distinct responsibilities and distinct kinds of behaviors associated with them. And one of the things I was sharing with her is that in the role of spiritual teacher and minister, you experience me in a certain way. And in the role I play in a board meeting or as an employer, as the CEO, I'm playing a different role and you will experience me in that role differently. It is still the same me. True of you and the different roles that you play as well, and understanding the role you're playing in the situation that you're in is really important in how it shapes and influences the conversations and the interactions you have with others. How important it is for us to be able to understand the roles that we are playing and the roles that others are playing in our lives as well. My mom, when I was little, absolutely played the role of mother to me. As my mother is getting a little older and needing some kinds of help, sharp as a tack, still very physical, but maybe can't quite open the jars. You know how tight jars are now? Or those child-proof bottles that you get? It's like, don't give me those. Give me the ones I can open, right? So the roles change a little bit. What becomes problematic is if we don't understand the role, that's a problem, or if we become too identified with the role of what it means, what we think it means to be a man, or the role of what we think it means to be a woman. When we get too attached to the role, and then life changes and we have to switch gears, that becomes a problem. Yes, that becomes a problem. Life requires us to be able to shift, to change, to bring our whole self forward into whatever the experiences are that are happening in our life. If you happen to be playing a role of caregiver somewhere in your life, several of you have come forward to me over the last number of weeks talking about the caregiving roles that you're playing in your life, and that can be quite heavy and quite burdensome. There is a powerful bit of advice that Frank offers in this chapter of bringing your whole self into the experience. And it is the idea of understanding the difference between helping, fixing, and serving. Helping, fixing, and serving. Think of that in terms of caregiving. Think of that in terms of parenting. We can even broaden it, actually, and say, think of that in terms of training an employee. Helping, fixing, serving. He includes a quote from Dr. Rachel Naomi Reman that captures this importance of understanding the difference between helping, fixing, or serving. Helping, fixing, and serving represent three different ways of seeing life. Stop there just for a moment. I think that's powerful. Helping, fixing, or serving represent different ways of seeing life. When you help, you see life as weak. Think about that for a moment. I think there's a lot of truth to that. When you help, you see life as weak. When you fix, you see life as broken. When you serve, you see life as whole. Fixing and helping may be the work of the ego, and service the work of the soul. Helping, fixing, and serving, representing three different ways to see life. When you help, you see life as weak. When you fix, you see life as broken. When you serve, you see life as whole. I found that to be very powerful because I often find myself jumping into fix, jumping in to help before I ask, is something broken here? Is something weak here? Is there a different way of being in interaction? And again, seeing ourselves and bringing our whole selves into the experience, leaving no part out. And the last, I'm going to have to tighten this up here. The last that he brings into this idea of bringing our whole self into the experience, leaving no part out, is how important it is that we tame the inner critic. It's pretty hard, if you think about it. It's pretty hard to bring our whole selves into an experience if we've got this critical voice going on forever in our head. I don't know if this is true for you, but I have a pretty strong critical voice. In fact, as I was thinking about it the other day, I have a critical voice that criticizes my critic. I really do. I don't need you to criticize me. I'm not saying you can't, but I do a good enough job of that all by my lonesome. Taming the inner critic is so important if we're going to bring our full self to one another, our full beautiful self to a world that really needs us to show up with our giftedness, with our authenticity, with who and whatever we are naturally. As that little kid, yes, we learn and we grow and we become more skillful and we become more aware and we learn stuff, and we can still honor the core essence of who we truly are. That's what it is to be free, and I think it's a process. And I think the process really does include taming that inner critic, which means we got to know when it's grabbing our attention, which means that it's a process of moving from judgment to discernment, moving from harshness to gentleness, to saying, oh, okay, I made a mistake here. I can correct that. It doesn't mean I am a mistake. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? It is so tied into accepting ourselves. He says acceptance is not approval. Approval is a judgment. Acceptance is simply an open-hearted acknowledgement of reality. And so as I wrap this up, bring back to mind yourself as a precious child, the you that could have sung like no one was listening and danced like no one was watching. Bring that little boy, that little girl back to your awareness. Then bring the image of that 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle of you. And ask yourself, are there pieces missing? And if there are, have the courage to identify what those are. Maybe it's doing a little bit of journaling work, maybe it's doing some prayer work, but try to understand what those missing pieces are. And take at least one step in the direction of healing that, of welcoming that, so more of the whole beautiful, majestic puzzle of you is present in your life. Namaste.